You'd work. Celebrate good times. Come on. Do, 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 do. Do, 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 do. Hey, kia ora. Helen Brahms here, coming to you live from Sun City in Arizona. Hope you're all having a super fantastic, sparkling start to Winning Wednesday. Yes, it is that day of the week where we celebrate our wins for the week. And we also are now incorporating questions about your life so you can tell your story. Your story is so valuable. It's a legacy. Your story is actually a legacy. You may not think it, but it is. Like we keep saying, there's people out there who need to hear your story. They may not even have been born yet. So that is why your story is a legacy. The things that you go through, the things that you experience, it's not only just for your recollection, but it's also to, when you tell your story, it's there for generations to come. You could have a great grandchild or niece or nephew who, 100 years from now, 150 years from now, are researching the tree, and they come across you and they want to know about you. Oh, you lived in 2021. Wasn't that when they had the global pandemic thing going? Or as I call it, the global pause. But of course, 150 years from now, it'll be whatever terminology they're using. Isn't that when they had that? Oh, wonder what their life was like during that time. Huh. But if they could find your story, if they could find something that you have written, your story, your journals, something that has been digitized and all of that, they can go in there and they can read what your life was like during the global pause. Think about that. That, 100, 150 years from now, you are now telling stories to your great grandchildren or nieces or nephews, and to some family member that isn't even around yet, not even a twinkle in their father's eye, because their father hasn't been born yet, that you are able to convey to them through your words what it was like to go through a global pause. Now think about this. We back in the early 1900s, they had the Spanish flu epidemic that ripped through the world. What was it like to live through that time? You're thinking, well, how did they cope? They didn't have the technology that we have today. They didn't have, there was a lot of things that we have today that they did not have. You couldn't go to school. You couldn't even get on a computer. They didn't even have them then. What was it like to live in a time and place in the early 1900s where there was a lot of the technology around, there was a lot of technology missing from their lives. You're coming through the evolution of life. What was life like for them during the Spanish flu epidemic back in the early 1900s? How do you know? You've got statistics that will tell you, well, we had this many cases and this many people died, and that's that. You've got that it lasted from this, it started on this date and it went to this date. Okay, those are the facts. What's the story? And you've got the newspaper articles. What's the story? Not what's happening out there in the world. Yes, you've got the news media and all that sort of stuff. What was your great, hang on, I'm trying to think about this. What was your great grandfather's experience during the Spanish flu epidemic? Do you know? Did they leave any journals behind? Did they leave any photographs during that time? What was it like? What was life like? Were they quarantined? What was quarantine like? Were they all shuffled off to a place and just put into these big rooms and until they got over it? What was their life like going through the Spanish flu epidemic? What restrictions did they have on them? Do you know? Do you have a journal to find out? You only have the newspaper articles from it. I have a great granduncle, might just be one granduncle. No, actually, he's a cousin. He was a cousin. He was a first cousin twice removed. He was my dad's first cousin first removed. But he lived through World War II, World War I, World War II. He was around during World War II. He served during World War II. He would send letters home to his family to let them know what he was experiencing at the time. And his parents, as were very, very much servants of their community, they would have his letters published in the local newspapers so that others who had sons over in that area where their son was fighting or doing whatever it was they were doing could read these letters to get some idea what the conditions were they were living through at the time, what was happening in their lives at the time, what were they going through. And this cousin ended up being a prisoner of war for 4 years. He was a prisoner of war for 4 years. He still got to write letters home. So they were able to find out the conditions he was in as a POW. He had seven escape attempts. He was a POW for 4 years and he had 7 escape attempts during that time. Don't know how whether he was released from being a POW or his 7th attempt was successful. I don't know that story yet. I haven't come across that story yet. But I've been going through, New Zealand has some of their old newspapers online up until 1950, I think it is, 1950, 1952, somewhere around there. And so I've been searching through looking for his stories so I can understand what was it like during World War II? What was it like for these guys going into the great unknown? You know, these guys in their late teens, early 20s, going off to war, not knowing what they were going to face. What were they going through? What were they eating? He even describes a Christmas meal that he got one year in one of the letters. But we would not have these if somebody didn't put pen to paper to tell them. So this is why I'm encouraging people, tell your story. I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds of stories out there. There are, you've got people who wrote books like Napoleon Hill and David Schwartz that wrote these books back in the 30s, the 20s and the 30s and the 40s. And they're all about, mindset and business and all that. And you go back and you read them today and the stuff in there is still applicable today. That was that was part of their story, that they wrote these books to leave this information behind for those that were following. So what information are you going to leave your ancestors, so your descendants, when they come? If they come looking for you, what stories are you going to have to tell? So being Winning Wednesday, what's an obstacle that you have personally been through, that you have faced, where you've had to rely on your inner strength, the support of others, where you've had to persevere and just keep moving forward? What's one of those obstacles that you've been through where you've come out on the other side victorious? And then how did you celebrate? Did you even celebrate? Those are your questions for today. What's your obstacle? Like I could put in there an obstacle. Let's see, I've been through lots. There was the whole cancer journey with my husband. That was 9 years, 8 months, 3 days. Then he passed. And so I'm still dealing with the widow thing. I really need to come up with another word for widow. I don't really like that word. Every time I hear the word widow, I think of a black spider, and I'm not spidery. Not at all. And I'm definitely not black. I like color too much. Sometimes I wear black shirts, black pants. I like color. So I'm not a black widow. No. Yeah. So every time I hear the word widow, I immediately think of black spiders. Just saying. But anyway, I got to get out of here. So what are some of the obstacles that you have been through in life? I remember, that's the one I was going to tell you. When I was in high school, at the age of 13, I decided I was going to join the Air Force. I went to the open day that they had at the Air Force base, at the RNZAF base Ohakea. Absolutely loved what I saw there. Absolutely fell in love with just the whole idea of being in the Air Force and jet planes, and I wanted to fly. Then I found out they wouldn't let women be pilots, and I'm like, damn it. And so I actually wrote the government a letter asking them why they would not allow women to be pilots in the Air Force. And I wish I had kept the letter, but I think it's got lost over the years, unless my mother still has it hidden away somewhere. But I don't remember most of the letter, but I do remember this one sentence. This one sentence said, and this is back in 1981, just to give you a point of reference. There are some things we have to limit the woman in. That was their excuse as to why they wouldn't allow women to be pilots. It wasn't until I was actually in the Air Force, and been in the Air Force for 2 or 3 years at that point. The day I got my glasses, base orders came out, and base orders is like the daily newspaper for the base. base orders came out, and in there they said, oh, we are now taking we've now changed the ruling that women can be pilots of support aircraft only, and we're now taking applications for those who would like to remuster and become for females who would like to remuster and become a support aircraft pilot. The day I got my glasses, I had just gotten back from the optometrist from having them fitted, and I'm sitting there with these glasses on. I am reading these base orders. Damn it. But I did have a victory along the way, because I had a guidance counselor at high school who kept telling me there was no way, because I was a female, that I would get into the Air Force. Now, he had met with the Air Force recruiter. The Air Force recruiter had been to the school and talked to us. I had already had interviews with him. I was well through the process of the interviews. I'd done all the testings and everything else. I'd had the physical done. I had been through everything. And the guidance counselor kept asking us, well, what's your backup plan? And I go, what backup plan? He says, well, if you don't get in the Air Force, what are you going to do? I said, I'm going to get in the Air Force. I don't need a backup plan. And he's like, you need a backup plan. He says, it's very rare for women to get in the Air Force these days. This is 1983. And I'm like, I just looked at him and I said, I'm going to get in the Air Force. I don't need a backup plan. There was no doubt in my mind that I was going to be in the Air Force. Absolutely zero doubt I was going to be in the Air Force. I had no doubt whatsoever. I knew that come the following year, I knew I wouldn't be going in that year. I knew that come the following year, because they wouldn't take me at that time anyway, because I didn't turn 17 until December. And they wouldn't let you in unless you were at minimum age of 17. And yes, you still had to have parental consent, and they basically had to sign papers that made the Air Force legal guardians of me until I turned 18. So I was actually, when I first entered in, I was a Air Cadet Youth. I had a little Y in a parenthesis. So everybody knew by saying that Air Force Cadet Youth that I was not of 18, not of age at that time. But I was determined I was going to be in the Air Force. And he kept asking me, what's your backup plan? What's your backup plan? And I kept telling him, I'm not having one. I'm not doing one. I'm getting in the Air Force. I'm getting in the Air Force. The really cool part about all of this story, which is well, not only did I get into the Air Force, he was the one that told me I had been accepted into the Air Force. He came and pulled me out of statistics. I was in statistics at the time. That was the class I was in. He pulls me out. He brings me outside, and he says, I just had a call from Kim, the first name of the recruiter, and he just called me to let me know that you've been accepted that your application for the Air Force has been accepted. He just doesn't know when your intake is going to be. It won't be January because that's too soon, but it may be the one in May, or it could be the one after that. And I'm just inside, I'm just going, yes. And then I'm sort of like getting all excited, and I'm like, oh, I haven't told my mom. And I was about to go back into the class, and he'd already walked off, and I'm doing my little happy dance in the middle of the hallway. I thought, oh, I haven't told my mom. Oh, because I went into the classroom, and they all looked at me, and I said, I just got accepted into the Air Force. And they're like, oh, that's great, because they all knew that was a dream of mine. That was my goal. So they were all like happy for me and all that. And then I'm sitting there and getting back, just getting back into the class and going and doing all my statistics, doing the math problems that they gave us and all that. And all of a sudden I went, oh my gosh, I haven't told my mother. So the teacher just said, go. So I ran out of the classroom, ran up to the office, was able to call my mum at work, because did I call my dad that day as well? He might have been working, I can't remember. But I went and called my mum to let her know that that I'd been accepted into the Air Force. And for some reason I couldn't call Dad that day. I think I told him when I got home, or Mum called him and told him. I can't remember that part, but I do remember running up to the office to tell my mother, like an hour after I had been told that I'd been accepted into the Air Force. So that was one obstacle as a teenager that I overcame, was being told by an adult that because I was a female, I had little chance of getting into the Air Force. What was my backup plan? And me telling him, as I said, time I was 16, that I did not need a backup plan, because I told him, I said, next year I'm going to be going into the Air Force. And I'd even told the school principal that back in July, just after. So in New Zealand, we're a 4-year school. And one of the things that they had this annual exam that you could either have it accredited based on your work throughout the year, or you could sit the exam at the end of the year. And it's a big nationwide exam. And I had said and the principal of our school, now our school was only 600 students in the entire school. So he would take all of the sixth formers, who were the 16-year-olds, which I don't even know what that's equivalent to over here. I think it's 10th grade, I think. when you're 16, whatever age that is. So he would take us one by one up to his office, sit there, and he would say, this is all the people in the sixth form year. Here's the cutoff line for being accredited, and here's all the people below that line. He says, you are sitting right here, and he points to just below the line. I went, excellent. And he says, if you don't get above that line, you're going to have to sit the exam. I said, excellent. And he looks at me and he goes, why would that be? And I looked at him and I said, because I know. And I had this is like within days of me submitting, because you had to be 16 and a half on the day of application for the Air Force. And I had everything ready to go. So on my half birthday, which it turned out it was, I could go into the post office and mail my application in. So I had just done that like within a day or two of this little interview with the school principal. And he looks at me and he goes, why would you want to sit and pass? He says, just a little more effort and you'll be accredited. And I looked at him and I said, if you accredit me university entrance, or known as UE, I said, if you accredit me that certification, I'm going to hand it back because that was my option, and I'm going to sit and pass it anyway. And he gives me this really weird look. He says, why would you do that? And I said, because I know that if I have sat and passed UE and I'm going for a job interview with somebody who has had it accredited that does not have a higher qualification with it, I'm the one that's going to get the job over them. He's like, why is that? I said, because I sat and passed, but they got accredited. Yeah. I said, but there's people out there who don't have to study. They sit in class, they hand in their homework assignments, they're acing the classes. They don't even have to think about it. And they get accredited based on their work and their schoolwork and everything else. I said, I'm not that way. I said, I know that I will be going into the Air Force next year. I know I'm not going to be here for the full year next year, which was our final year at school. So I said to him, I said, I know I'm not going to be here to sit bursaries, which was our end of the year exams at that time. And I won't have a higher qualification to go with the accreditation. If you accredit me UE, I won't have a higher qualification to back it up. And he's sort of like, oh. I said, so I'm going to sit and pass it anyway. I didn't realize how much goal setting I did as a kid. Telling them I'm going to get into the Air Force. This is days, I'm going into the Air Force next year. I'm not going to be here for the full year, so I'm going to sit and pass the end of the year exam. So when they later on in that year, when they handed out they brought all the sixth formers into the library there, and they started calling names and handing out envelopes. And you could tell by the thickness of the envelopes those that were going to be sitting the exams and those who had it accredited. And I as soon as they called out my name and I saw the thickness of that envelope, I thought, I'm sitting and passing this thing. They did not accredit me the thing, and I did. I went, I sat, and I passed. And then I got into the Air Force. So these are some that's not, some people might consider that major. Some people, well, that's not that bad. There's been a lot of crap that's happened to me in my life. A lot of times I've had to stand up and obstacles I've had to overcome. You have been through those too. If you think back over the years, the places that you've lived, the things that you have experienced, that obstacle of, if you're one of those people that like to bungee jump or skydive or anything, that first time that you did it, the first time, what was that like? Actually, don't answer that question. I want to know the obstacles. That one's coming up in another day. So anyway, I got to get out of here. I've spoken way too much. But what obstacles have you faced in life where you have stood up and you have plowed through and come out victorious on the other side? Let us know in the comments below. How did you celebrate? Because we're all talking about Winning Wednesday. So how did you celebrate your victory over your obstacles? When you got through the obstacles, how did you celebrate? Anyway, I'm out of here. Have a super fantastic, sparkling, winning Wednesday. And we will catch you guys back here at 6 p.m. Pacific time. Hey, konera.